hoping you can see him, but I have sent Gary to the garden with my phone. He's working on so many projects, but he can do something other than a project. All I tell him is if he breaks my phone, I get the top of the line. You know what he says? Do you think I care? He better not break my phone. He won't.
G'day, I'm Gary from Southern California. I'm going to do a quick garden tour in my garden. This time I'm doing it solo. Robbie handed me her cell phone and told me to come down here. I'm going to go through by myself because I've got a few birds breeding in my garden and I don't want to disturb them too much. So we thought it'd be best if just one of us came down here. So with that, I'll just go down into my garden behind me and I'll give you a quick garden tour. So the main part of my garden is under this arbor here. So I've got a fairly large garden here that's well established. This year I've set up a new garden right next to it. So I'm working on that area mainly right now. I've had a lot of projects going, so I haven't gotten a lot of things planted. This garden area here is at the base of these stairs that I made. So I built these stairs so I could get down to my garden a lot easier. So we've got these massive retaining walls that made it difficult to get down here. When we got the property, we inherited this structure. I'm not sure exactly what it originally was going to be or was. It was partly roofed, but I removed a lot of the broken old material. I ended up building a garden down here. So some of the plants that I've got growing, I built this elevated planter so that I can lift some totes off the ground. In here I've got some of my peppers. The purslane has taken over, so I've got to remove that. So I've got a few different types of peppers in here. I've got some society garlic. In this kiddie pool here I have my eddos. These have come back nicely. I've got a few tubers that I still have to plant up. Some of these are just started, but I've got a couple here that I have to plant. So I've got a few of those going again. I've also got mint in there. So growing mint in a bucket or a tote in a kiddie pool wicking system is a good idea. I'm able to contain the mint without it taking over my garden, so that's a good way to keep the mint going. I put in some pepino cuttings in this tote, so this is another wicking system I've got set up. I put a lot of cuttings inside the totes and I don't have to take care of them. The cuttings will set root, then I can move them to where I want them. I've got a lot of kiddie pools set up throughout my garden. It's a little hard to see them now because everything's pretty much overgrown. I've got a few different cactuses. This one's a Peruvian apple cactus. It's going to flower again. It started to flower but didn't set fruit, so I'm hoping it's going to set fruit. These cuttings are about a year old. I've got a number of dragonfruit varieties that I haven't planted up yet. My white flesh dragonfruit is growing really well. It's taken off and it's up to the rafters. I started clearing some of my walkways, but I've got a number of birds nesting in my garden. I've got 2 species of towhies, and right now they've got babies. I've got sage growing here. It's flowering and bringing in a lot of pollinators. I've got eggplant that's starting to flower, so I'm looking forward to getting eggplant again. I'm just going to make this as quick as I can because I've been cleaning up in my garden, but I had to put a stop to that. One of the birds that I've got nesting in my garden is spotted towhies. So I've got a nest here, and those babies are getting some size to them. I don't want to disturb them too much. So parents are in the background calling, so I want to make sure that I keep clear of those. I've got a lot of different things going. I've got fennel growing along here. I wanted to clear the pathways, but because of the nests, I just have to be cautious of that. I have a lot of chia growing throughout my garden now. It's self-sown. So I planted some last year and it got really tall. I noticed if it's planted in the shade, it can get up to 8 foot tall, but when it's getting more sun, it'll only go to about 18 inches to a foot tall. That produces these purple flowers. And the purple flowers really bring in the pollinators. A lot of my plants haven't been doing all that well this year. We've had mixed weather. In each of my raised beds here, I have 2 ponds. It's kind of difficult to see. They're pretty much overgrown. If I had to define my garden, I would call it a wild garden. And a wild garden is where I would say I bring in nature and I kind of leave things the way they are. I don't do a lot of maintenance, but by bringing in the nature, I don't have to do a lot of pest control. So we don't use any herbicides or insecticides here. So I just let things run wild. Now I'm going to move away from this area because the towies are back here. And they want to come in and feed their babies. So I'll move away. So I've got my water chestnut in this kiddie pool here. I harvested most of it last year. I left about a third, and from a third that I left, it's grown back really well. It's taken over the kiddie pool. So this is a kiddie pool that I set up. I didn't alter it in any way, so it's basically sitting in the ground. That's one of my crocodiles. It's actually some garden art that I've put in my garden. But this kiddie pool here, I modified. So I added some black plastic sheeting to it, and I created some concrete rock work. I made some fake rock. So this is more of a natural look, and that is the original look. I added some water chestnuts into this pond. These are the ones that I harvested last year and I stored in moist soil in the back room. They're the ones that we were eating over the winter months. So the ones that I had left over, I planted out. By the end of the summer or into the fall, I'm sure that will fill in. So this pond would look something like this one. I think what I'll do is I'll get away from the nest and I'll move further into my garden. I've got a lot of different plants that a lot of people may not recognize. Some of them you might. My ubes are starting to come back. They've been slow to come back this year because of our weather being hot, cold, and our nighttime temperatures dropping. A lot of my tropicals have taken a while to come back. In this archway that I've got here, my arbor, my green tunnel, this is the first green tunnel that I planted. I've got my runner beans going really well. So I've got them at various stages. This one I planted last year and it came back. So it has a root system. If you can grow runner beans as a perennial, they produce a really strong root system. They die back to the roots and they regrow the following year. So this is a second year plant. I've been harvesting the beans when they're at this stage, So at this stage I harvest them as green beans. At this stage I've been harvesting them and I've been shelling them and treating them like fava beans, just cooking them when they're still soft like that. So this one's just starting to fill in. I'll leave it a little longer and I'll be able to eat them as a soft bean. The ones that I leave longer until they dry, I harvest them as dry beans. So this is doing really well. The hummingbirds really love the flowers. So pretty much all day long I'll see hummingbirds feeding on the flowers. And this is a good perennial plant for us here. You can grow them as an annual. Along here I've got more dragon fruit. I've got a different variety here. This is a red flesh variety. And my yacone is growing back. So I've got a couple of yacone plants and this is doing quite well. We've got a lot of tubers down there to harvest. So this year, I planted this last year and this year it's growing back. So I should have plenty this year to harvest. The cool weather really wiped out my bananas. So some of my bananas aren't doing as well as they should be. I've removed some of the ones that died off and they're starting to come back. So I've got my bananas along the wall here. I have a layer of wood chips, maybe 6 to 9 inches on the ground. On top of that I have sweet potatoes and nasturtiums as a green ground cover. I have walkways where I just have the wood chips. I try to clear the ground cover away from it so I don't trip on it. I have this hot tub set up and this is a nursery. I have the hot tub on the outside and a kiddie pool on the inside. So I've got a large kiddie pool that I fill with water. I have a smaller kiddie pool in the center. I've got broken down wood chips in the center kiddie pool. I use this as a nursery area. So I put in cuttings. So I put in purple tree collared cuttings that need to be transplanted out. So once they set root, I can plant them where I want them. I've got some cannas that I started in there. I've got some Swiss chard. I've got a few other things that I've got growing in there. The cannas self-seed, so they're coming up everywhere. So these ones are seed pods. These are the seeds that came out of here from the ones that I left too long. So along here I've got different plants growing. I've got a number of wild fennel plants. I've also got some blueberries that I put in pots here. So these are, I think, 15-gallon pots. I planted them in this part of the yard. So they get partial sun during the day, but it's a little bit more sheltered. I've got this Swiss chard plant here. This Swiss chard plant here I staked up, and this is where another nest is. So in the center of this I've got a California towhee nest in there. That's the other towhee that I've got nesting in my garden. So I want to keep clear of that area. I want to quickly finish this video up. This is my original pond. So it is overgrown too. I've got some water celery and my turmeric is starting to grow back. And of course I've got some Canna edulis. I've got the yellow flowering form. And I've also got a red flowering form in here too. This I want to remove because I want to redo this whole area. Once the towies have nested, I'll be able to get back in here and I'll clear the cunners out. I've got some malunga that I want to grow in this area here. So this is a fairly sheltered area. It should be good to grow that in here. This is a good area to grow the malunga. My passion fruit is doing really well. It's taken off and it's up into the rafters. So I've got a lot of passion fruit this year. This is the second year that it's been growing. I'll be harvesting a lot of passion fruit very shortly. I hear the birds in the background. They're not really happy with me being down here. So this was a quick video. I hope that you enjoyed it. It's the first video I've done with Robbie's cell phone, so I'm going to have to sort of practice a little more with this. With that, I hope you got something out of this, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat what you grow. Goodbye.